Hey guys, awesome week of Come Follow Me. It seems like it's going to be really weird, but there are some things we can learn from this week. We're in Exodus 35 to 40, and then the suggested reading is Leviticus, just verses 1, 16 and 19. If you want to read more than that, you completely go ahead, but it's quite intense. So unless you really want to deep dive or look at something specifically, it's not necessary. We're all good. And you'll have realised that as we talk through this week, and as you look at it, you'll be like, oh yeah, okay. So let's talk about that. So for this whole thing, Leviticus, the whole book of Leviticus, which we will talk about as well, but also for Exodus 35 to 40. Now remember there's that bit that we missed out, like about 5 chapters, like 2 weeks ago? That was the Lord's instructions, or the blueprints, to Moses to build the tabernacle. Now 35 to 40 is now the building of the tabernacle according to those blueprints. So it kind of repeats itself, which is why we didn't have to read the last lot. There's also more in Deuteronomy that they talk about the making of the tabernacle and the symbolism behind it. And we'll talk about symbolism as well. We're just going to focus on 6 things I think there is. So there's a lot to deep dive into. So if you're really familiar with this one, go pick something and really look at it. And if you're not familiar with it, don't be scared. You still can learn something. So let's get into it, right? So, some things to keep in mind. This is some things to keep in mind. Often we can read scripture and see that these things were clearly important to the Lord, but we don't see how they really apply to us, like right now. Our 35 to 40 of Exodus gives detailed description of Moses' tabernacle, a desert house of the Lord. Our temples now both greatly differ, yet also have many things in common with this ancient tabernacle. And you'll see those differences. If you've been through the temple, you'll know that. You'll see some of those things. And they all have reasons, and there's, again, different things around that. But it's still a temple, right? It's still a place of worship and a holy place. So symbolism is everywhere. It's everywhere. And some of it is amazing. Some of it is like coincidental. Some of it is even like just suggested. It's not actually there. So the ones that we're going to focus on in insight number 3, which will come up, actual like scriptural based symbolisms, directing you to Christ, because that's what we focus on around here, is Jesus Christ. There are other things in there, things like down to like on the menorah or the candlestick that gave light, which light is Christ, that there's all these little almond buds and almond flowers. That's because the first thing to wake up in that part of the world is the almond tree. So when the sun comes up, just before the sun comes up, the almonds open up. So that's like kind of that representation of first light, or the best light, if you will. So there's that as well. So there's some interesting ones, some ones that are suggested and not actually based in fact, just kind of opinions, and then there's others that are scriptural based. So you'll be able to see the difference. But yeah, there's especially many things symbolic of Christ. So we can see and find value in ancient Israelite worship as they strengthen their faith. We can find value in that, just as we find value in and strengthen modern day Israel with temple worship. So just like we go to the temple and find value and strength in that, we can look at their worship and find value and strength in that too, and how they put this together. Now you think about a blueprint. This is about following the Lord's plan or the Lord's pattern. Now, if you not remember, of course, who doesn't know the story of Noah who built the ark? The Lord told him how to do that, and it worked perfectly, right? As much as human can be perfect, that's how it worked out. Who else built stuff that the Lord said to, right? Some boats in there. Nephi built a boat. Who else built boats? Brother Jared and that lot. And they built it to the Lord's blueprint. They didn't know how to build boats. They had some woodworking skills, like they weren't completely, unaware of those sort of things. But it was the Lord's blueprint. So they followed those instructions, those patterns, those plans perfectly to the absolute. And it's the same thing with the tabernacle, which is why it held up, which is why it worked like it did. Very cool. If you are a fan of Don't Miss This, you would have seen or even just go have a look at that part of the video for this week's study. There's actually a replica of the tabernacle that a stake did for like a youth activity thing. and they went to visit that, so you can actually kind of get more of a view of it. Although there's a really cool picture in the Come Follow Me manual, which I pulled out and stuck in my book. Oh yeah, so you get to see that as well. But like, if you want to go look at what it actually looks like and get more of an idea, take a tour with them. It's not that long. You don't have to watch the whole video if you're not into all of it, but just watch that little bit of it. Yeah, so there's that as well. But it's about pondering the scriptures, and although we might not found value in all of this, although there is a verse in here that I actually really like, and it's a turning point for Israel. It's 36:5. Now this is about everybody bringing in gold and bits and stuff like that. So it just said, and they spake unto Moses, saying, the people bring much more than enough for the service of the work which the Lord commanded to make. So there's abundance when everyone contributes. Now this was a turning point for Israel because they had been, negative. Oh, got that back there. And then, they'd cleaned up a lot on the Sabbath day worship and had really focused on some worship points and teaching and their whole system of like tens, hundreds, thousands, like ministering, which happens now, like in the form of like bishops, elders quorum presidents, Relief Society presidents, state presidents, etc., and up the chain. So that was working really well. People were starting to feel more sort of organized. They were getting a little more used to being in the desert. So this is a real turning point. Although it didn't stick, like there's still a lot of wickedness and there's still a lot of falling away and not listening to Christ to come. But this is a point where they started to see, oh, here's a temple that we're going to build in the desert, and they bought all their stuff, so much so that it was in abundance, and they said, look, we've got enough, you don't need to bring any more. So that was kind of really cool. So I do like that in there. But there's a lot that we can learn from these verses, even if they don't seem applicable to us, that there is still value in them. So we can find that. President Thomas S. Monson said, as we read and ponder the scriptures, we will experience the sweet whisperings of the Spirit to our souls. So even when you're reading something like this and you think, well, it doesn't really apply to me right now, and it might not. Doesn't always, right? Because it's not always for you right now. Might be for someone else. But you can still feel that sweet whispering to your soul of the beauty that would have been in the desert to have a house of the Lord. And even if it was a tent and it was constructed how it was, the effort they put into it and the beauty that it would have been, I would like to behold it. And I probably was sitting with you in heaven looking at it going, wow, that's kind of cool. But I want to look back on that. It's one of the things I want to look back on and just see it with my own eyes and look. I think it would be pretty cool. So yeah, there's some things to keep in mind that not always does it seem like there is, but we can always find some value in it. All right, hang around. We're going to go look at the tabernacle and how it points us to Christ. I'll see you there.